Thanks for tuning into the Birds and Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson, and right now I'm here with Al Vernacchio. He is a classroom teacher at Friends Central School in Pennsylvania and has been a human sexuality educator and consultant for over 20 years. He's the author of For Goodness Sex, changing the way we talk to teens about sexuality, values, and health. We're really excited to have you on the Birds and Bees, Al.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really glad to be here.
Wonderful. One of the things that I want to start out with and want to first get into everyone's minds is that we've got Al Vernacchio coming to Utah. Man, what are we going to be talking about?
So we're going to be talking about how to help young people, especially teenagers, develop healthy sexuality and how parents can become more comfortable and confident and skilled in talking to teens about healthy sexuality.
Wow. So we're going to be talking about healthy sexuality and how we can start discussing that. This seems pretty intense.
Well, I don't think it necessarily needs to be intense. I think it's very natural conversation, and one of the things I hope to do is help folks at the summit see that talking about sex and sexuality isn't really all that different from talking about anything else. And that if we lead with a sense of really loving kids and wanting them to become the best, most authentic person they can be, then the conversation sort of takes care of itself from there.
Nice. That seems a lot like you've had 4 different TED Talks, and you've been on YouTube, and as well as you've got a blog that you do as well, right?
Yes, I do, right.
So when you come to Utah, there's a lot of ways for us to seek you out on the internet. What things are going to be different? What's going to be the deciphering factor instead of just watching a YouTube video of Al Vernacchio?
Sure, I think that's a great question. And, what I hope and my experience has been that when I appear in person, which I do a lot around the country, 2 things happen. One is I get the chance to really interact with the audience in a very different way than somebody watching my YouTube videos or reading my book. And for me, building that relationship with an audience and being able to engage in conversation, not just during the presentation, but afterwards, is really important, because I think building community is an essential piece in creating healthy relationships, including sexual relationships. The other thing I think that's important is that I'll be talking about some things at the summit that I haven't talked about in my videos or even in my book. Yeah, I always keep developing ideas, and I'd love to share some of my thoughts on creating a culture of consent, which is something I've been talking a lot about with young people and with parents, and just some other ideas. So I think that if folks come to the summit, they'll definitely get some additional information from what I've already put out there in the world.
Wow, some exclusive information. That's exciting. Here in Utah, there's a lot of decisive conversations about sexual education, teens. We're essentially ground zero for a lot of different policies that come out and tend to affect, like we've got the porn as a health crisis is kind of our big one, and we're really very against sexual education and teens and in schools. How might you be able to help us with bridge building versus creating, I'm right, you're wrong, this is the best way, this is not the best way, as you come here to Utah?
Sure. One of the things I do at the beginning of all of my presentations is make sure that my audience knows that I'm there simply to offer an invitation. I don't tell people what to do. That's not my job. I don't tell people that what they believe or think is wrong. That's not my job either. What I do hope, though, is that we can create an atmosphere where we can relax a little bit, just be a human to human, talking about something that we really care about. Our foundation for this conversation is that we really love kids, and we want kids to be healthy and happy and fulfilled and not to fall into some of the traps and some of the difficulties that maybe we did when we were growing up. So I really would like us to think about sort of us being on the same side from the beginning. I may talk about this differently than other people have talked about it before. And what I ask, and the only thing I ask of an audience, is that they be open to the invitation. My experience is many people, after they hear me speak, go home to consider some of the ideas. And, maybe they can see something in a different way. And then what they decide to do with that is up to them. But I really want the chance to create dialogue and community and again, just to be someone who is there to invite exploration, conversation, thought, not to dictate any particular dogma.
That really makes a lot of sense, especially thinking about on both sides of the spectrum, whether you believe that sex education should be taught in schools or not, or that teens are experiencing whatever they're experiencing, that the majority of the time, everyone's looking to best protect and love their children.
Right. I've never met a parent who didn't want their kid at some point in their lives to be involved in a happy, healthy, loving, intimate, pleasurable, and usually sexual relationship. So I'm not there to say that should happen right now, but if that's really something we think is important for young people to be able to have, how do we sort of set the stage now so that they can get there in ways that are successful and non-traumatizing and that are not fraught with a lot of the anxiety and a lot of the misinformation and mythology that very often we grew up with.
Oh, wow. That makes a lot of sense, to be able to have the parents really wanting to have that understood or want their children to have that experience. However, it's a really hard place to get to for parents to be able to have a conversation and try and bring in values and everything else. This is can be a really tricky place to have conversations, especially around sexuality.
Right, it can be. And, one of the things I also always tell audiences, and I think this is important, is that I'm not a parent. So I actually can't speak from the experience of having my own children and what I did with them in their growing up. Now, I've been in a parental role to thousands of kids over my career in education, and I certainly have, been instrumental in the lives of my godchildren and my nieces and nephews. But I think that because I come not as a parent, I can bring a perspective that is sometimes just a little bit different, and that maybe, again, my hope is that it creates this invitation to look at things differently and to move past some of the fear. I think most parents do want to talk to their kids. I think they just don't know how. And I really want to help provide some tools and some ideas for how that can happen. I've rarely met a parent who didn't think it was their place to talk to their kids about sexuality. And I think parents are the primary sexuality educators of their kids. I do happen to think that schools have a really important role to play in that, but that's not what I'm there to discuss or debate. What I'm there to do is to talk about how parents and loving adults can get better at talking to kids.
Yeah, to be able to start those conversations, and because really they're the front line. They are.
Yeah.
I hear one of those tools. Oh, yeah, they totally should be. I hear one of those tools is involving pizza. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So one of the things that I have become known for is that I use pizza and the experience of having pizza as a metaphor for what healthy sexual activity and healthy sexual relationships are like. And I use that model in comparison with the baseball model, which is really the dominant way that in America we sort of think about the way sexual activity and sexual relationships work. And I think the baseball model is a pretty unhealthy model. And so I offer an alternative to that with my pizza model. For as long as I've been doing it, people think it seems to make a lot of sense. So I'm excited to share it with the folks at the summit.
I'm really excited for it as well, because it does seem to, when we start talking about first base, getting to second base, third base, home, and then seeing this, inviting another model into it. I always thought that was kind of interesting, is One, the most interesting part for me about the baseball model is specifically that I still to this day have not been able to be answered on like, okay, what is first base? And there's always a debate at what first base entails. And I'm excited to see how you turn from that into addressing it into this new pizza model.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a nutshell, the difference between the baseball model and the pizza model is that the baseball model is often dictated from the outside. So somebody tells you what first base is, or somebody tells you how you're supposed to behave. Whereas the pizza model really starts with recognizing our own hunger, if you will, or our own sense of what we want. And then from the inside, figuring out what makes sense for us and why, and proceeding that way. So that's just a kernel of it, but I'll get much more into it later.
That'll be wonderful. Nice teaser to that. I can't wait. Because you said we'd be talking a lot about how parents can best address and start to have these conversations with teens. You're also going to have a room full of clinicians, medical providers. Is this valuable, or is it going to be pertaining to mental health therapists or medical providers?
Oh my gosh, sure. It is so crucial that medical professionals, mental health professionals, social workers, classroom teachers all have a framework for talking about sexuality with young people. I mean, if you work with young people, you have to be prepared to talk about healthy sexuality with them, because that is one of the most important developmental processes that young people are going through, is trying to figure that out, figure out who they are, figure out how they fit in the world, figure out how they interact with the world. And so I think that the information that I'd like to share is relevant not just on a personal level, but on a professional level as well. And I also think that even if you're somebody who doesn't work with kids in any way, this is great information, because it might help. The invitation is also for you to reconsider your own values or behaviors or ideas. So I think there's going to be something in it for everyone, whether you're coming at it from a personal or professional direction.
It sure sounds like it. It sounds like any point, the people that are going to be there, either parents or have parents or are thinking about becoming that way somewhere along the lines, or they're going to be working with someone that is. It sounds a lot like everyone could benefit from it.
Right. And even if a person lived in complete isolation on an island, they are still a sexual person, and they still should be thinking about what sexuality means and how they interact in the world as a sexual being, even if they're not in a sexual relationship or don't want to be or aren't in a romantic relationship. This is not just about information that we sort of pull out of the file cabinet when we're ready to be sexually active with somebody. This is information about how we live our lives every day in the world. I think that framework is especially important, and I think opens up more doors for conversation, because we're not just talking about what happens when people get together in sort of intimate or romantic or sexual interactions. We're talking about how this impacts us as we walk through our day, every day, no matter what we're doing.
Completely. And I love that you address that in your book, For Goodness Sex, changing the way we talk to teens about sexuality, values, and health. Some of the ways that I saw you coming across in that book was specifically talking about sex and sexuality and how important all of this is, and ways to be able to bring it up and talk about it. And if you want to hear more about the book Al Vernacchio has come out with, as well as his thoughts about the pizza model and how to talk to your kids about sexuality, as well as how to address your own values and teaching the values with sexuality, there is a podcast that we are doing right now, and you can get that podcast for free if you sign up for the Rocky Mountain Sex Summit. And we look forward to seeing you out on September 23rd, 2017 here at the Rocky Mountain Sex Summit in Salt Lake City, Utah.
I can't wait to be there, Braxton. Looking forward to it.
Right now, go get your tickets at RockyMountainSexSummit.com, and we will see you there.